Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Meher Sher and these are the headlines. Pakistan military spokesperson Major General Babar Iftikhar says India is using Afghan soil against the country. Speaking to foreign journalists in Rawalpindi, he said India is aiding terrorists through weapons and funds. To a question, the spokesman said Pakistan has no favorites in Afghanistan and that it only wants peace in the war-torn country. Indian troops have martyred 2 Kashmiris during a military raid in the Islamabad district of occupied Kashmir. The region has been under a military siege since India revoked its special status in August 2019. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the Kashmir issue should be resolved through UN resolutions. Speaking at Pakistan-Sri Lanka Trade and Investment Conference in Colombo, Prime Minister Khan said he is optimistic about peace in the subcontinent and the conflicts in the region must be addressed through dialogue. The Prime Minister said the subcontinent has tremendous business opportunities and trade in South Asia should be linked like the European Union. Iran asks the United States to make the first move in saving the 2015 nuclear deal. Addressing the UN conference on disarmament in Geneva, Iran's ambassador Ismail Baghai Hamaneh said the onus is on the offending party to return, restart, and compensate for the damages. It comes after Washington urged Tehran to cooperate with the UN nuclear watchdog and reverse steps that reduce transparency. Ghana has become the first country to receive coronavirus vaccines through the COVAX vaccine sharing initiative. The WHO program is aiming to deliver about 2 billion doses worldwide by the end of the year. Globally, there are more than 112 million infections and over 2.4 million deaths, including 12,708 in Pakistan. And in the Pakistan Super League, Karachi Kings will face Islamabad United today at the National Stadium in Karachi. Both teams have won their previous matches. Well, those were the headlines. More news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. And now for the news in more detail. Pakistan military spokesperson Major General Babar Iftikhar says India is using Afghan soil against his country. Speaking to foreign journalists in Rawalpindi, he said India is aiding terrorists through weapons and funds. He said Afghan intelligence agencies are aware of India's activities on their soil. The DGISPR said Pakistan has no favorites in Afghanistan and that it only wants peace in the war-torn country. He also highlighted Pakistan's constructive role in the Afghan peace process. To a question, Major General Iftikhar said security forces have eradicated organized terror groups in North Waziristan. He added that several key arrests have been made in connection to the killing of 11 coal miners in Balochistan last month. Meanwhile, Indian troops have martyred 2 Kashmiris during a military raid in the Islamabad district of occupied Kashmir. The authorities also suspended internet service in the district to hide the brutalities of Indian forces in the area. Nearly 300 Kashmiris have been killed by Indian troops since New Delhi revoked the occupied valley status in August last year. The valley has been under a crippling curfew and communications blackout since then. Pakistan has repeatedly called for a global action on extrajudicial killings of Kashmiris. Moving on, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the Kashmir issue should be resolved through UN resolutions. He was speaking at the Trade and Investment Conference in Colombo after meeting with Sri Lanka's President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Prime Minister Imran Khan said he is optimistic about peace in the subcontinent and the conflicts in the region must be addressed through dialogue. Imran Khan said the subcontinent has tremendous business opportunities and trade in South Asia should be linked like the European Union. He also offered Pakistan's mediation between China and the United States. Speaking at the event, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi noted that Pakistan's ranking in ease of doing business has improved. Meanwhile, Pakistan's advisor on commerce, Abdul Razak Dawood, invited Sri Lankan business persons to invest in the China-Pakistan economic corridor. The conference was organized by Pakistan's Ministry of Commerce and was attended by the top dignitaries of both countries. In India, farmers have threatened to block and shut the country's parliament down if the centre does not repeal the agriculture laws. Farmers leader Rakesh Tikait says 4 million tractors will rally on New Delhi's roads instead of the 400,000 on January 26th. Addressing a grand meet, Tikait urged the farmers to be prepared for the Delhi march as the call for it can be given at any time. He added the Republic Day violence in Delhi was a conspiracy against the farmers. Meanwhile, another farmer from Punjab destroyed his wheat crop in protest against the 3 laws. Now, the U.S. has again urged Iran to cooperate with the UN nuclear watchdog and reverse steps that reduce transparency. In a press briefing, U.S. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said Tehran is moving further away from nuclear deal compliance. Price said if Iran resumes its full compliance with the nuclear deal, the U.S. will be prepared to do the same. He said Washington will be in close consultation with the nuclear watchdog on appropriate action to deal with Tehran. Price insisted that Tehran cooperate with the International Atomic Energy Agency to resolve these issues. Earlier, France, Britain and Germany condemned Iran's suspension of additional protocol under JCPOA. This comes after the IAEA expressed deep concern over Iran's undeclared nuclear material at a secret location. And the U.S. and Iraq have agreed to hold perpetrators of the recent rocket attacks on Iraqi and coalition personnel accountable. U.S. President Joe Biden and Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi spoke on a phone call. In a statement, the White House said Biden affirmed U.S.'s support for Iraq's sovereignty and independence. The leaders also discussed the importance of advancing the strategic dialogue between the two countries. This follows a rocket barrage on the heavily fortified Green Zone in the capital city of Baghdad. Meanwhile, in Ecuador, at least 62 people have been killed and dozens wounded in riots between rival gangs at 3 prisons. The government describes the violence as a concerted action by criminal organizations. The riots erupted in prisons in Guayaquil, Cuenca, and Latacunga cities simultaneously. Officials say the order was restored with the help of an additional 800 police officers. The government says some police officers were also wounded during the riots. President Lenin Moreno has declared a temporary state of emergency in prisons across the Andean country. And protesters have taken to the streets in Myanmar for the 21st straight day against the February 1st coup. Demonstrators are gathering to hold a multi-ethnic rally in MYANMAR in the northern part of the commercial hub of Yangon. Indonesia says Foreign Minister Retno Marsudi will not travel to Myanmar to hold talks with the country's military leaders. In a statement, the Foreign Ministry said the decision comes after the input of other ASEAN countries that this is not the ideal time for the visit. Earlier, the group of 7 condemned intimidation and oppression of those opposing the coup. Amnesty International has called on the Malaysian government to explain its decision to deport more than 1,000 Myanmar nationals despite a court-ordered stay. The court on Wednesday fixed March 9th to rule on whether the groups would be allowed to challenge the deportation. The court also extended the stay order, barring the remaining 1,014 detainees from being deported before the next hearing. The Kuala Lumpur High Court on Tuesday had granted a stay on the deportation amid fears of their safety. But hours after the ruling, Malaysian authorities repatriated them on 3 Navy ships sent by Myanmar's military. Malaysia is home to more than 154,000 asylum seekers from Myanmar, where the military has seized power this month. And the global number of coronavirus cases has crossed 112 million, with the death toll exceeding 2.48 million. Brazil has reported over 1,300 COVID-19 deaths in a day, while its tally is over 248,000. More on the pandemic in this report.
While some governments are easing the coronavirus curbs due to lowering cases, warnings of spring waves driven by the new variants and hiccups in the inoculation drives pose a major challenge to fight the coronavirus. Experts have rung the alarm bells over a more contagious UK variant likely to fuel a surge of cases around April and May in the United States. Meanwhile, the CDC data proves racial inequality marring the vaccine drive in the United States. In Bolivia, prosecutors clashed with riot police to demand the repeal of a controversial health law, banning them from going on strike during the pandemic. In Greece, doctors have gone on strike and dozens march in Athens to protest suffocating conditions at hospitals during the pandemic.
This is not a law that answers the necessities of the country. The government tells us that we are inhuman, but they are the ones who are inhuman, as they have done absolutely nothing to improve Bolivia's health system for decades. That is why we are out on the streets to tell the government to stop with unconstitutional laws.
Europe's vaccine drive is far behind schedule, with Brussels confirming that AstraZeneca will fall short of its promised delivery by more than half. In the United Kingdom as well, the number of vaccines administered has fallen by over a third in the last week due to a dip in supply. Hospitalizations in France have hit a 12-week peak as regional officials urge for a ban on public gatherings. Ireland is reopening the schools, but at the same time has extended other lockdown restrictions until April. Meanwhile, the Netherlands slightly eased COVID-19 restrictions while keeping in place the controversial nighttime curfew.
I want to be clear that we only take these risks today because of the existing measures. That includes the curfew and the advice to welcome only one person a day at home. All the measures we extend today will be in place until March 15th. But if the infections rise again, then all other options to tighten the rules will be on the table again.
Meanwhile, the World Bank has threatened to suspend its multi-million-dollar financing for Lebanon's vaccination drive over politicians jumping the line.
Whereas Pakistan has lost 50 more lives to the new coronavirus over the past 24 hours, the death toll has risen to 12,708. Health officials say 1,196 more people have tested positive. Out of over 574,000 infected so far, more than 538,000 people have recovered. However, there are still 24,000 active cases in Pakistan. Moving on, President Joe Biden says the U.S. has no closer friend than Canada. This comes as Biden held his first bilateral meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The virtual meetup sought to turn a page on the Trump era, stressing deep ties between the two countries. Biden said Washington and Ottawa will coordinate on a wide range of issues, including COVID-19, economic recovery, and refugees. The U.S. president said he has agreed with Trudeau to work together towards achieving the goal of net zero emissions by 2050.
Canada and the United States are going to work in lockstep to display the seriousness of our commitment at both home and abroad. To that end, we're launching a high-level climate ambition ministerial, and to align our policies and our goals, and to achieve net zero emissions by 2050.
Trudeau welcomed Washington's renewed attention to climate change in contrast to former U.S. administrations. And now moving on, the U.S. says it will seek election to the top United Nations Human Rights Council later this year. The U.S. quit the council in June 2018, but President Joe Biden's administration returned as an observer earlier this month. The U.S. Secretary of State said Washington humbly asks for the support of all UN members in a bid to return to a seat in this body. Addressing the Council, Blinken said Biden will work to eliminate what he called the forum's disproportionate focus on Israel. Israel has received the largest number of critical Council resolutions against any country. And a U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee has held a hearing on massive cyber attacks that targeted government agencies. Top executives from SolarWinds, Microsoft, FireEye, and CrowdStrike Holdings attended the hearing. The executives told the committee that they were still trying to assess the damage of the hacks. They defended their conduct in the breaches and sought to shift responsibility elsewhere in their testimony. They also warned lawmakers that the intrusion is bigger and more dangerous than they first realized. The executives argued for greater transparency and information sharing about the hacks with liability protections.
We do need to enhance the sharing of threat intelligence. Now, that's the term in the cybersecurity community for information about attacks that people are seeing. And our basic challenge today is that that information too often exists in silos. It exists in silos in the government, exists in different companies. It doesn't come together.
The hacks blamed on Russia targeted about 9 federal agencies and about 100 U.S. companies. And now moving on, Mexico has urged the United States to provide details on the arrest of the wife of jailed Mexican drug lord Joaquin El Chapo. However, President Andres Manuel López Obrador termed the detention as a U.S. matter. Talking to reporters, Obrador said he hoped Washington will share further information about the arrest. He added her arrest may be linked to the case of former Mexican Security Minister Genaro Garcia Luna. Emma Coronel Aispuro was arrested by authorities at an airport just outside Washington on Monday. The U.S. Justice Department charged her with helping Guzman continue to run his drug cartel during his imprisonment. We'll be back with more stories after a short break. Stay with us. We're back. In Ukraine, at least 27 law enforcement officers have been injured in clashes with protesters near the presidential office in downtown Kyiv. Several thousand people across Ukraine are protesting against a court ruling in the case of civil activist Serhiy Sternenko. In a statement, the city police department said protesters used spray and flares against the officers. The department said police detained 24 protesters after they did not respond to their calls. Earlier, the court gave a guilty verdict against Sternenko, who has been convicted of abduction. Heavy floods have displaced more than 15,000 people in Peru's eastern Madre de Dios region. Officials say the floods damaged at least 1,500 homes, knocking out electricity and water supply. They said torrential rains caused the rivers to break their banks and damage infrastructure. The government has declared a state of emergency in the Amazon region, which borders Bolivia and Brazil. Rescue and relief efforts are underway to help thousands of people displaced by the flooding.
Now the most immediate thing is to care for the people who have been affected by the overflows of the rivers and see how they deal with food issues, health issues. Remember that we are still in a pandemic, so this is something that compounds problems that these victims face.
And golf great Tiger Woods has undergone surgery after sustaining multiple leg injuries in a car crash in Los Angeles. A statement on his Twitter page says Woods is now awake, responsive, and recovering in his hospital room. Addressing a press conference, Sheriff Alex Villanueva said there was no evidence of driver impairment. Villanueva said Woods appears to have been traveling at a relatively greater speed than normal. He added there were no skid marks or signs of braking.
No skid marks, no braking. So apparently the first contact was with the center median, and from there then crossed into the opposing lane of traffic, hit the curb, hit a tree, and there was several rollovers during that process.
Fellow golfers, former U.S. President Donald Trump and others sent messages of support to Woods. And now moving on, citizens of the Gaza Strip have breathed a sigh of relief as they will now have a chance to access reliable energy. Officials say talks on a gas pipeline have moved from the abstract to the concrete level in recent weeks. More details in this report.
For years, a gas pipeline project was a far-fetching dream due to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Peace talks between the two sides broke down in 2014 and never resumed amid mutual suspicion and outbreaks of violence. But Israeli, Palestinian, Qatari, and European interests have converged in recent weeks with the aim of bringing the energy source to Gaza in 2023.
The Gaza Strip has been suffering for years from a suffocating electricity shortage. There's only 200 megawatt of power available, while this winter we needed around 500 megawatt.
The plan will see natural gas from the deep water of Leviathan Field in the eastern Mediterranean flow into Israel. From there, the gas will move into Gaza through a proposed new extension. Under the arrangement, Qatar will fund Israeli side of the pipeline, while the European Union will pay for the section in Gaza.
The recent breakthrough in the power deal about connecting power plant with natural gas has been received positively, and there were positive reactions in the Gaza Strip. That will be good for the electricity distributing company because that means there will be reduction in the expenses. Also, that will be reflected on the production process.
If successful, the pipeline project will provide a steady energy source to the Gaza Strip for the first time in years. The gas strip will bring an end to the rolling blackouts that have crippled the economy of the blockaded Palestinian enclave.
Well, age certainly has no limits. It is certainly true for this 81-year-old fitness grandma who has taken TikTok by storm. More details in this report.
TikTok, a social media platform of the young trend-setting crowd strutting their stuff, is now home to Germany's very own 81-year-old fitness dame. Nicknamed Fitness Gran, Erika Rischko is not letting Corona get to her and definitely has no plans for sofa bingo. Instead, she's conquering TikTok one press-up and one cha-cha at a time. Rischko has uploaded more than 100 videos of herself doing exercises like planks and push-ups, as well as dancing, to encourage others to remain active during the lockdown.
Super, ist einfach toll.
This is super, just great. I am super happy about it. I have never been as confident about myself as I am at this moment. This whole thing really gave me a push, all of this, TikTok and Instagram.
She has amassed around 125,000 followers and more than 2 million likes on the app. And her fame has spread beyond Germany, with the Spree-Langfeld local now also a fixture in America.
Könnt ihr nicht unsere Großeltern sein?
Will you be our grandparents? These are some requests we get. Or, my granny is dead, couldn't you take her place? I live here, but I live even further away. Especially the Americans with their God bless you. All these, it's just amazing and crazy. Nobody was expecting this. I thought people would watch us, but all this attention, it's just crazy.
Rischko, who reads all the comments after breakfast, beams at the cameras and gets ready for her next challenge.
And now for the latest in business. European stocks are trading mixed as markets digest remarks from U.S. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell and promising German data. London's FTSE has dipped over 0.5%, while Italy's FTSE, MIB, and the CAC 40 in Paris have also slipped marginally. Meanwhile, Europe's stock 600 has edged up slightly, and Frankfurt's DAX has added around 0.5%. Earlier, all Asian bourses declined. Britain's biggest airport has reported a $2.8 billion annual loss after passenger numbers hit the lowest levels in 5 decades. Heathrow normally sees 80 million passengers per year, but it said numbers in 2020 dropped to 22 million due to the pandemic. The airport authorities said Heathrow has $5.5 billion of liquidity, which could keep it going until 2023. They called on the government to agree on a common international travel standard to allow passengers to start flying in the summer. They have also demanded business tax breaks for airports to help them ride out of the crisis. Last year, Heathrow lost its title as the busiest airport in Europe to Paris as its flight schedules contracted more than its rivals. And now it's time to take a look at the latest weather updates from around the world. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.